Erwin Smith, the devil humanity needed. The terrifying thing about Erwin is how quickly he makes decisions, not because he's reckless, but because he already accepted the cost before everyone else did. While others hesitate, while others mourn, while others desperately search for another solution, Erwin moves forward instantly. He moves as if human life can be measured, calculated, and sacrificed within seconds. And maybe that is what makes him so inhuman. To Erwin, no sacrifice is too great if it pushes humanity one singular step forward. It could be soldiers, dreams, lives, or even his own humanity. Everything is disposable in pursuit of victory. And yet, people still followed him. Not because they were forced to, but because Erwin could turn despair into purpose. That was his true weapon. The moment Erwin speaks, fear begins to disappear. Doubt becomes conviction. Cowards become soldiers. And dying men suddenly find meaning in their deaths. Every speech he gives builds rhythm like a march towards death itself. And somehow, everyone follows. And that's because Erwin understood something terrifying about humanity. People can endure hell if someone can convince them that their suffering means something. That is why Erwin was more than a commander. He was an instrument, and with nothing but words, he could make people walk willingly into hell. Like most of us already know, Erwin Smith was the commander of the Survey Corps. Before Erwin's powers were discovered, it was almost like humanity was trapped in space. Humanity was constantly losing. Every expedition beyond the walls ended up the same way, with the result of death. Soldiers did not join the Survey Corps expecting glory. They expected suffering, they expected fear, and more than anything, they expected to die. Humanity was trapped inside the walls, slowly losing hope with every failed mission and every life sacrificed for almost no progress. And yet somehow, the Survey Corps kept moving forward, not because victory was guaranteed, not because survival was likely, but because of one man, Erwin Smith. Erwin became the force that carried the entire Survey Corps on his back for years. The man who could look directly at hopelessness and still convince people to keep fighting. Again and again, soldiers rode beside him knowing there was a high chance that they would never come back. That is what made Erwin so terrifying. Erwin understood that humanity could not survive through morality alone. Every decision that he made forced him to choose between human lives or humanity's future. And almost every single time, he chose the future. The moment Erwin realized that sacrifice were necessary, his emotions stopped interfering with his own judgment. While everyone else was still overwhelmed by fear, guilt, or hesitation, Erwin was already moving forward. And over time, those decisions slowly transformed him, not into a hero people admired for kindness, but into the devil humanity depended on to survive. Normal commanders lead with caution. Idealistic heroes try to save everyone. And most people freeze the moment emotions begins clouding their judgment. What makes Erwin different is how morally altered he became compared to the usual anime characters who would be in his place. This makes the story feel far more unpredictable. His true weapon was never strength because we all knew that he was not the strongest in the corps. Everything he acquired came because of his words. When Erwin spoke, it never felt like a simple speech. It felt structured, almost like music building towards something inevitable. His pauses, his tone, the way his confidence never wavered, all of it created a rhythm that pulled people out of fear and turned it into something else. Everyone following him knew how strong his conviction were because no matter what stood ahead, Erwin was always at the front, leading and preaching his belief with absolute certainty. At first, soldiers would still be terrified. Their mind would scream at them to turn back. Survival instinct would take over, but Erwin would keep speaking, and slowly that fear started to shift, not disappear, but transform, because his words did not erase death. They gave it meaning. He took something meaningless and reframed it as purpose, as something larger than any single life. Soldiers were no longer thinking about themselves, their families, or their fear. They became part of something collective, something greater war, something inevitable. There was a moment in the middle of pushing his soldiers toward what looked like completely hopeless charge, Erwin was suddenly caught by a titan. For a brief moment, everything should have ended there. Any commander would panic, any normal human in this world would struggle, any normal voice would disappear, but Erwin did not stop. Even with death literally grabbing a hold of him, he forced his voice through the chaos. Blood, pain, and danger meant nothing in that moment compared to the message that he was trying to deliver. And with what little time he had left, he did not beg, he did not hesitate, he did not look for rescue. He simply continued what he had started. He told them to move forward. Now, we can all agree that Erwin Smith was a glitch in the system, but what philosophy explained this? What psychological chord is Erwin touching that allows people to follow him even when death is almost guaranteed? Friedrich is one of the philosophers that indirectly answer this question. In the average life of an Attack on Titan citizen, soldiers are constantly sent to die against the Titans. Entire towns are wiped out without warning. Children grow up inside walls under constant fear, and even victories comes at cost of massive loss. And when humans are faced with that level of brutality and uncertainty, they do something almost instinctive. They simply search for meaning in order to survive psychologically. This is where Friedrich's philosophy becomes deeply relevant. He argued that life is fundamentally harsh and chaotic, and that humans cannot endure it without a why. When suffering appears meaningless, people naturally begin to construct external system of meaning. It can be religion, ideology, tradition, or belief in a higher purpose. These frameworks does not necessarily change reality, but they make reality bearable. They transform pain into something structured, something that feels justified rather than random. In everything that we could see and analyze, meaning becomes a survival tool. And Erwin Smith ultimately becomes the embodiment of that meaning. He does not just lead soldiers into battle, he becomes the why that allows them to move forward. By transforming death into purpose and sacrifice into necessity, he gives structure to what would otherwise feels like pure chaos. Under his command, suffering is no longer random, it is direct toward a goal. Erwin succeeds not only as a commander, but as a psychological anchor for humanity itself. He becomes the commander who could turn pain into direction and uncertainty into conviction. Erwin Smith was not humanity's greatest hero, and he was not simply a monster either. He was a man who understood that survival does not come from purity, but from sacrifice. Everything he did, every order, every speech, every life lost under his command was built on one brutal truth. Someone has to be willing to carry the weight of impossible decisions. That is why his soldiers followed him, not because they were blind, not because they were forced, but because in a world filled with chaos and death, Erwin gave them something rare.